All right. So it's 11:30, and it's time for us to start our workshop. So the name of the workshop is Let Me Be Free. And that idea is that the things that shackle us, the unconscious use of the creative process, shackles us physically, emotionally, and spiritually by not forgiving. So by learning some basic forgiveness tools, it can free us to be happier, healthier, etc. Has anyone here had any kind of forgiveness training before? Couple of hands. Good. So this will be a review for you for the most part. I'm sorry? Yes. Radical forgiveness. Yes. So we just want to take a look at this to see where we might be stuck. So John tells me that I can advance the slide. Help.
I programmed it to do that. Try this one. Okay, hold on. I'll be right back.
Okay. So we want to get used to doing this because we want to have more opportunities to do virtual workshops, and so working out the technical bugs is really important. There we go. So the question is, why forgive? So who is forgiveness for? Forgiveness is for the purpose of clearing our own field of energy. Do you ever feel stuck? Well, this is one of the things that might be in the way. Usually when we refuse to forgive, it's because we mistakenly believe that forgiveness is for the benefit of the other person. And depending on what the issue is, that's the last thing we want to do, is give them any kind of a benefit. Would you say that's true? Have you ever been stuck that way? While the other person may derive some benefit, the primary beneficiary of forgiveness is the one doing the forgiving, right? So we might not believe that, but that's generally what works. Forgiveness of oneself creates more space to forgive others. So in your experience of the forgiveness work that you've done, have you found that you've gotten more energy or it's freed you up? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. That might be easier.
Okay, John. That's all right.
Now we're getting real professional. Yeah, I got 3 things I'm holding.
What? How come you're not up there? Yeah.
Well, because if someone has a question or a comment, then I'm right here with the microphone.
How's that?
That's good. Can you tilt it a little more back?
This way?
That's perfect. Thank you.
There you go.
So where are we? John, we just lost everything. It's jumping. It's not liking that.
It wants you, John.
Well, tell you what, John, why don't I just, I'll just run it from here.
Okay. We want the slide that says when forgiveness is withheld. There we go. When forgiveness is withheld, the lack of forgiveness manifests itself in a wide variety of ways in our lives. One thing we can be sure of is that it will manifest itself in some unpleasant form eventually. The universe will have its way with us, the cosmic 2x4 upside the head, whatever it is. Too often, and I find this especially for men, that because we don't express our feelings readily, that we tend to bury these resentments or resentments and need to forgive and all of this until it looks like a cemetery with headstones that say, this is betrayal A, betrayal B, whatever it is. This is the time that that this person did this to me. And so we have a whole cemetery of unresolved issues that need forgiveness. But it's easier to compartmentalize and not address them. At least that's what I found in my own experience, especially when I've worked with men, because that's what we do, is we compartmentalize. There's a really interesting TED talk on the difference between men's brains and women's brains, and I won't get into it right now. But the question is as we look at all of these things, is it a pattern that we can recognize that the need for forgiveness is showing up in different people, but it's the same thing? That becomes a real valuable gift to us if we can recognize that. And it can trigger us in a memory or a situation that we run into that it keeps coming up. So lack of forgiveness is holding on to resentment for a longer period. It doesn't mean we never get angry or never feel resentful. These are normal emotions experienced temporarily by healthy people. So can anyone share anything about their experience in this process that they've run into, where the sense of relief perhaps when they went through that process? Yes.
Well, I've recently have a common law husband. He's like my boyfriend. And all of a sudden, I was as his caretaker, and I was going, I don't understand what you're doing. You're nitpicking at me. You're nitpicking, and I get really tired of it. And I go, wait a minute, what the hell do you think you're doing? I'm a person, I have feelings, and I don't really like this feeling that I'm getting. And, my dad was listening, and he goes, yeah, because, I was bearing the resentment down because I was feeling sorry for him because he is blind. But instead, he uses the fact that he's blind to nitpick at me and make himself feel better.
So how did you work forgiveness into that?
I finally worked that I forgive everything he does, but that still doesn't make it right. It's like, no, you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you that you're wrong, but they're okay.
So it sounds like there's still some work that you can do there on that anger. Yeah. Anyone else have something they want to share about that forgiveness process and how it worked? And I know this is a difficult thing to talk about sometimes because we're not maybe even aware of the list of things that we could possibly forgive. And so that's one of the purposes of this, is to start to try and look at, what else is going on here that might benefit us. Next slide, John. Another common misperception about forgiveness is that we're condoning the behaviors that led to the feelings of anger, betrayal, or resentment. Right? We're not condoning anything. That's not the truth at all. The behavior itself may have been reprehensible. The question is, are we going to hold ourselves in prison because we feel justified in our anger, you know? And that's a hard one, you know. Why does it have to be me, the one that has to forgive? You know, they're the one that's acting out. They're the ones that's causing all this misery in my life. Why do I have to be the one? Anyone know the answer? Because you're the one that's separate. Yeah, yeah. And so how do you handle that?
So what has come to my mind is the minister that I studied with in terms of forgiveness work. One of her statements of principles was, no one is against you, even if they think they are. And so, so people may act out of their thinking that they're against you, and it's up to me to see through that and accept them exactly where they are. And when I accept them exactly where they are, it frees me completely.
Yes, Rachel.
Yeah. There's a thing about recognizing what is true in a given exchange, and being able to step out of it to see that what another person is saying to you is really what is going on inside of them. And it takes me a bit to step outside to recognize that, because I definitely react. And knowing what is true, I have to first know what is true about me so that I don't take on whatever they think they see. And then I have to know what is true about the other person, because I hold them in the center of light and know that there is love there, no matter how things get communicated. That's a whole process.
It absolutely is, and you really nailed it, is, you know, can we recognize that this is a moment to step back? That's, for me, the hardest part, is because we just tend to get engaged right away and want to, you know, say what's on the top of our mind, and that's not always the best case. But to step back and consider, you know, where am I coming from, and what is this really about? And that's part of what we were talking about last week with the compassionate communication, is taking the time to step back and really focus on our intent. Marjorie.
I actually have an example that happened to me, and it was something I did not realize I was angry until I got sober, and then I realized how angry I was. And I was angry that at the relationship my parents had. I thought, and I don't need to go into detail, but I would protect Dad and try to make it better. I was the manipulator, and it took a long time, and I'm not sure what finally did it, but I finally realized that part of why I had never married was because I didn't want what they had. Mm-hmm. And when I invited them to go on a trip with me, and I felt complete, I don't think I ever apologized to them. I did it with my actions, and it relieved me and opened up me to meet the man I've now been married to for 27 years. And it wouldn't have happened. I had to first recognize I was angry, because I didn't originally, and then I had to work through it and finally come to the truth, which was what they had isn't necessarily what I have to have.
Thank you. And you know, that's especially difficult in an enmeshed relationship, as you were, you know, and helping to perpetuate that, the whole codependency thing. And that's why in my talk this morning, I asked if you can revisit those things. Like you said, I found out why I was angry. What a gift. But if we don't do that work, there's no way that we can discover that and then make the breakthrough that can change our lives. So it really, stepping back and taking a look at a situation that may be really unpleasant and discovering the gifts in that. Yeah. We're responsible for keeping our own energy field open and flowing with love. Keeping love flowing in our energy field maintains us in the flow of divine goodness, such as prosperity, health, and loving relationships. It's getting to that place of uncluttering ourselves from all those mental constructs that may be triggered by a person, right, where we have a need to forgive, but we don't do the work. We've got to unclutter all that stuff to really step into, we have such wonderful classes in prosperity and health and all these other things, but if we don't really get to the blocks that are preventing us from experiencing greater prosperity or love or whatever it is, then we can't get there. Not easily, anyway. And oftentimes it involves the forgiveness process. Next slide, John. It went back and forth. Yep. Holding on to anger is the next. There we go. Holding on to anger and resentment has the opposite effect from forgiveness, causing blockage in our energy field, therefore blockage in our connection to source energy. That's what we were just talking about. Holding on to anger and resentment for prolonged periods of time will manifest as poor health, shortages in financial affairs, unfulfilling relationships, or all of these. Keeping our energy field clean maintains us in the flow of divine harmony and wholeness. And Ernest Holmes says this to say, no one can feel one with God who hates anyone or anything. No one can feel wholeness, or no one can feel one with God who hates anyone or anything. Is that easy to do? Are there any examples of us being able to do that? And, hate is a strong word, but our relationship with God really can be any negative emotion that we have toward anyone. Anyone. So what does oneness with God mean to you? And how do you work through that, maybe not hate, but the discomfort with the other person? How do you reconcile that desire to be one with God and that disconnect, that cognitive dissonance with your opinion about a politician or an ex? Or how do you get to that place of oneness with God? Yes?
For me, over the years, when I needed to resolve some ill feelings toward maybe a family member, I'll say an example. For instance, my father. When I started to understand and know his story of his origin, what he had lived through in life, and I drew on my compassion, empathy for him as a child, as I was a child at one time, I started to put things together and understand better how he wasn't the perfect father, as if there is such a thing, and or mother, that he struggled in his own childhood, and it was projected into his fathering in some ways. And when I started to know his story, I was able to understand and forgive and feel for him. And this is after he was gone. Yeah. And feel for him. And, it relieved me. And now I can think of my father as doing the best he could do. And he did pretty darn well for us. But knowing his story and what he lived through made all the difference. And I have used that, how do you want to call it, method, you might say, with every issue I have in dealing with difficult personalities, I call them. When I start to understand somebody's story and where they come from, right away, I love. The love comes up for me. And I'm just putting that out there. Thank you.
Brilliant. I mean, that's the work that we can do, is really trying to understand the other person. Now I have another slide. It's actually a video clip that might give you some more clarity about exactly what that lesson can be. So, John, if you would. It's Maya Angelou.
If I think of my life as a class and what I've really learned, I've learned a few things. First, I'm aware that I'm a child of God. It's such an amazing understanding to think that the it, which made fleas and mountains and rivers and stars, made me. What I prayed for is humility, to know that there is something greater than I. Then I have to know that the brute, the bigot, and the batterer are all children of God, whether they know it or not. And I'm supposed to treat them accordingly. And it's hard, and I blow it all the time.
Mongrel class of people.
I'd like everybody to think of a statement by Terence. The statement is, I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. If you can internalize the least portion of that, you will never be able to say of an act, a criminal act, or I couldn't do that. No matter how heinous the crime, if a human being did it, you have to say, I have in me all the components that are in her or in him. I intend to use my energies constructively as opposed to destructively. If you can do that about the negative, just think what you can do about the positive. If a human being dreams a great dream, dares to love somebody, if a human being dares to be Martin King or Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Malcolm X, if a human being dares to be bigger than the condition into which she or he was born, it means so can you. And so you can try to stretch yourself. So you can internalize, homo sum, humani nihila me alienum puto. I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. That's one thing I'm learning.
Nothing human can be alien to me. So when you're looking at the brute, the batterer, the abuser, if that person was in your life, can we move to that place of recognizing that those components are within me as well? So if you focus on your favorite politician that you love to hate, can you get to that place of looking and understanding that those same components are within you? And maybe because the anger is so robust in you, maybe there's work for you to do about that because it's so close to the surface. Is that making sense? Excuse me. So Ernest Holmes says this: For when there is nothing in us that could condemn others, there will be no condemnation left toward either the self or others. It is then and only then that we can unblock the stream of life which so freely flows to all and through all when we permit it. That's the key piece, when we permit it. It's there available to us, but if we're standing on the hose, nothing's going to come out of the end of the hose, right? We have to get off that hose by doing the work about forgiveness or just understanding ourselves that the same thing is within us that we detest about the other. That's not easy to accept, is it? Anyone have any feelings about that? Because it's a powerful thing. Yes?
I don't like people that are angry or that people that have a sense of superiority, or that they have this sense like, I'm right and you're wrong, because that's what's in me. Because I look at it and I look at myself and I go, who's right? Who's wrong? I'm just the same as they are. And I go, oh God, I really have to examine my own life and not so much at them.
And that's the place to start, for sure. That's the place that we can't move forward until we look at that. What is in me that I'm reacting at so severely, so strongly? This is not easy work. It takes a lot of courage to do it. And, this is the place where you do it in this community, because we're just walking each other home. That's really what it's about. And so that clip by Maya Angelou just makes me able to breathe a little bit and recognize nothing human can be alien to me. Such a powerful statement. And so when I'm seeing, especially in the early years when my son was acting out, I would say, well, that's not too far from what I did as a kid. It may be different in quality or whatever, but, and then I'll tell my wife, well, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And she'll say, well, you should know. I kid, but it's the truth of recognizing those things that are uncomfortable to look at. So the next slide, 5 steps to self-forgiveness. What's the first thing that you notice on that slide? Okay. There's also 6 things up there. So the first is acknowledge what happened and what you have learned from it. That's a key piece. What have you learned from it? Can it even be a gift there, as Marjorie was saying? Acknowledge what happened and what you have learned from it. Accept that you did the best you could with your current, at the time, level of awareness and development that's beginning that process of self-acceptance. Set an intention to live and make choices from your new expanded awareness. So if we're doing the work, we know that there's something else that we could do differently in our lives. So we've got to make that intention, accept and bless yourself, embrace yourself and allow love to flow through your body, and go to the next what happened and repeat the process. So this is your opportunity to take right now to think of something, what happened in your life. And we're going to work through this individually, not out loud. You're going to do it privately about what happened and what you learned from it. So it can be something very simple. I mean, you don't have to dive deep at this point, but I gave you the handout so that you can do this work. So let's take a few minutes now, if we can, and think of something that happens that probably you could do a little self-forgiveness. Acknowledge what happened and what you have learned. Positive learning, a gift. If you're at that point of being able to accept it as a gift. And if you have any questions, just raise your hand. And the second question is accept that you did the best you could with your level of awareness at the time. Now, is that just excuse making, that second one? Well, I was young and unaware and stupid. What's that?
Or in too much pain.
Or in too much pain, yeah. Couldn't see beyond the blinding pain that I was in. Or I thought that's how people were to be treated. I had no good role model.
I was overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, that's a good one. Yeah, I like that one. You know, when you're raising children and working and trying to keep a house together, that sense of overwhelm can be just extraordinary. You have no time for yourself or each other, or even no time to be present with the kids, or in my case, the spiritual community. It's like I ran out of there on Sundays sometimes because I just could not do the small talk. You know, it was just overwhelming. Set an intention to live and make choices from your new expanded awareness. Well, I remember when we were first starting out in ministry, you know, and the volunteers wouldn't show up. That was a real trigger there. But I was in the mindset that if the coffee wasn't made or the chairs weren't set up correctly, it was my job to do it. And so I built up a lot of resentment. And then I recognized that if the coffee isn't made, so what? If the chairs weren't perfect, somebody else would do it. And that freed me to be present to my community. It freed me to be present to whatever it was that I wanted to say on Sunday. Because otherwise I would be distracted by the overwhelm, and the talks that I gave when I was starting out were just awful. I mean, in looking back. You know, because I wasn't in the right place. So I had to set an intention to clear that. And number 4, bless yourself. Accept and bless yourself. I was doing the best I could at the time, and, you know, it all worked out. I like number 5. Embrace, self-hug yourself, and allow love to flow throughout your body. How else do you do that besides the embrace, or what happens when you do that? Feel better. But how else do we embrace ourselves and allow that love to flow? Take care of ourselves, Marjorie?
To me, it comes when I absolutely let go and say, I did the best I could, and I'm good with that. And sometimes it takes a while. to get to that. But that is the most freeing thing I can do, when I really get comfortable with saying, I did the best I could, and the other person did too.
I love that, taking the time, repeating the process until you get there, because it can take a long time. It can take a lot of work to love yourself. Because, I mean, there's so many reasons why we aren't there. Maybe our upbringing or whoever we're in relationship with might be a good example of someone that can't love themselves at all. You know, is always finding something wrong, nitpicking or whatever it is. You know, at the core of that is the inability for them to love themselves. But our reaction to it is our inability to love ourselves. And for me, that's where the healing work in any relationship really begins, is that you can't get to that place of accepting and loving the other person until you truly can get to a serious acceptance of yourself and loving yourself. And it's a lifelong process, because there are so many things that trigger us and take us out of that place of being able to love ourselves. Oh, I messed up, I missed the deadline, I didn't do that right. You know, the reasons are legion, you know, why we can't love ourselves. I have something that I call my left-hand column, where I'll walk into a restaurant and I would never say anything out loud, but I'll notice, well, that person was rude, you know, the hostess was rude, or, you know, the table is a mess, it doesn't look very clean in here, you know, just the list goes on and on and on. And I said, well, what's that really about? You know, that's not in them. I mean, the objective reality may be that the restaurant is dirty or whatever, but why am I being triggered by it? And what popped into my mind right away was, I'm paying good money for, you know, an exceptional experience, and that's what, you know, and I look at that and say, okay, that may be true, but how is that helpful? So right away, it's an opportunity for me just to see that, you know, whatever we call that, the inner child or the little brat or whatever, you know, just saying, thank you for sharing, I appreciate that. Because it also, there's a great gift in there that I have that discernment to be able to notice those things. Because a lot of people don't care. One of my favorite experiences with Kath, my wife, is that when we go to a restaurant, how many times I need to send my meal back because there's something wrong with it. And that's a very objective thing. You know, if you have chicken, you don't want it to be raw, so you got to send it. But it seems like it never happens to her. So what's that about? You know, it's that left-hand column just manifesting an opportunity for you to choose. Are you going to say something, or are you just going to swallow it? It's a great lesson, and I'm still learning. So does anyone have anything to share as you went through that? Yes.
So there is something in my life that I have struggled with in terms of self-forgiveness. And I've, you know, done all the writing and the reading and the listening and the forgiveness work and all of that. And I just had one heck of a time forgiving myself. And about 3 weeks ago, but I haven't really spoken this very much out loud in its entirety. I've spoken like little snippets to people, but I've never really shared the whole thing. And about 3 weeks ago, I was able to share it with someone who loves me dearly. And after I got done with the whole thing this time, like I just told it all out. And to have her loving care, her loving ear, not, you know, placating or contradicting or trying to tell me what to do or any of that. She just listened and loved me. I was able to get to forgiveness of myself, of the things that troubled me. So when you ask the question at number 5, embrace yourself, I let her embrace me too. Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. You know, that's the work right there. And you feel lighter. That's the place that we want to get to. Anyone else?
Nice work. So being on a self-love journey, that number 5 reminds me of something that I've tried to start doing, and that is I journal in the morning, but now I'm trying to also journal a little bit in the evening, and at the end of every day, just mention some things that I did right, because we are so often, so easily, our brains just go to anything that we think just didn't go quite perfect, or that we didn't just do quite right. But if you actually train yourself to know that at the end of your day, you're going to write down the things that you are proud of yourself for that day. And they don't have to be big things, but just getting in your mind that you're focusing on those things helps you really acknowledge that, wow, I'm pretty dang darn cool. And so that's a practice I've been working with.
Thank you, Wenda. And that's the keynote right there, is what is our spiritual practice? If I was to ask you privately, what would you come up with? Is there something that you really do on a regular basis? Because that's the key. Is, as I said in my talk this morning, we have this constant craving for excellence or results or whatever it is. And if we don't have it, somebody else will have it for us. You know, so we are always in this place of judging results or judging actions or judging behavior. And, you know, that's a hard place to live from, but that's the gift. And the reconciliation, the resolution of that gift is the spiritual practice of coming back to be humble and kind to yourself. That I'm always going to be in this place of this noise in my head about accomplishments or who I should be. And that's okay. That's the fullness of our, you know, of our hearts wanting to experience the best that life can bring to us. And with that being said, we're always going to fall short of that, because that's just the way it is. That's that good, better, best. Never let it rest. When the good becomes the better becomes the best. And we move on to the next thing. And if we don't take a pause in our practice to say, okay, well, thank you for sharing, but right now, I'm just going to do that self-embrace. I'm just going to be gentle with myself and come from a place of love. And that's not always an easy thing to do, because we can have lots of people help us not to, you know, depending on how we were raised or depending on the relationship that we're in, of people always being able to point out how we've let them down. And the recognition is we can either accept that or just thank them and say, you know, thank you for sharing. That's not my experience. That isn't what I think about myself. You may not say that directly, but you can ask them more questions. Tell me more about that. If you really want to hear it, if you really want to get to the heart of the issue, is asking more questions about, you seem so angry. Well, I'm not angry, I'm sad. Oh, okay, well that helps that you're sad. It helps to know that. Tell me about the sadness. How long have you been experiencing that? What is that about? See if we have the courage to really dive into those things. It makes for a very different relationship. And the other person may not cooperate at all, but that's not your business. Okay? So in number 6, it says, go to the next what happened. So that's your assignment, is keep doing this work. Keep doing this work on self-forgiveness. Because at least for me, there are a lot of things in the course of the day that I can forgive myself for. All I've got to do is look at the news, and my reaction to the news or to a story or whatever, and then ask myself after I've gone through my, left-hand column about all the things in that news story that really triggered me, and say, well, what's that really about? Is that helping you? How is that helping you? To really find if there's a gift there or not. So for me, the self-forgiveness is really the only forgiveness that we really need to do. Although you do have another page, a couple of pages, that says the 7 steps to forgiveness of others. And it is a graduate course in forgiveness. But I think it's important to be able to start it out with nothing human can be alien to me. If you start from that place, it really opens it up to the possibility that you can actually forgive the other person. So it says, acknowledge that you've been hurt. Feel your feelings of anger, betrayal, resentment, or any others that come up. Allow yourself to feel them and experience them fully within yourself. This is where we can experience that spiritual bypass, because that's hard to do, is feel your feelings about what is really going on here. I feel totally betrayed for what is happening in this country right now. Maybe that's what you say. But what do you do with that? It just can inflame you to a higher level of anger and betrayal, and you see how that works. But if you don't get those feelings out and acknowledge them, then you really can't go to the next step. You really have to get into those feelings and use some way to get them, expressed, whether in a journal or through meditation or just going to the beach and yelling at somebody, not yelling at somebody, yelling into the ocean. Oh, you call yourself a surfer? We do this step so that we are not bypassing our feelings only to have them resurface later in some unhealthy way. Because when it's of the nature, let's say it's something on the news, that news story is going to be repeated ad infinitum. The story is going to be, and if you're going to be triggered every time you see the person's face or hear the story about climate change or vaccination, it's like it's just going to trigger me into more anger. Bless the feelings from step 2. Can we even start there? Well, thank you for making me so angry. Say a prayer of blessing and acceptance of those feelings. Remind yourself that the feelings are not who you are, just something you are experiencing. What a concept. What a concept. I am not an anti-vaxxer. I just feel angry when I see someone making a case and not really considering the life of somebody else. But that's not who I am. The next is make the decision to forgive. Before doing so, intuitively determine whether you have spent a healthy amount of time experiencing your feelings. That goes back to what Marjorie was saying, is take your time with this. You may need the time to really go over this and decide whether or not you're complete. This doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It may take some time. The next step is to open to the power of divine love, grace, and wisdom to guide you in your forgiveness. What does that look like? Open to the power of divine love, grace, and wisdom. If you don't have a spiritual practice, then it's unlikely that you can get to that step. If you don't really know how to access divine love and grace and wisdom, how can you do it? You know, we say these things in this teaching, open yourself up to divine love, grace, and wisdom. But what's the practice involved in doing that? Journaling might be one at the end of the day. Gratitude might be one. You know, Meister Eckhart said, if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, it is enough. Well, do you say thank you enough, is the question. Because that's really all you need, is to move into that place of gratitude. Ask your divine wisdom to reveal to you how you might find empathy for the person you are choosing to forgive. Again, this can be very difficult to do. And if you don't know how to do it, get thee to a practitioner and ask that question. How can divine wisdom reveal to me how I might find empathy for this person? And do the work around that with somebody else. Or as this young woman was saying, realize that that person hadn't experienced much love in their own life. Then empathize about how difficult that life might have been for them. We had last week talking about compassionate communication, the person that was really got off on conflict. And what an opportunity for you to really bring that into meditation and say, what would that person have had to experience to make them so belligerent? Or to get so enthralled with being in conflict all the time? Because that's, as you said, it can open our heart to what's really going on. And depending on the relationship, you can ask them about that. Open your heart and allow love to flow to the person that you are forgiving. Repeat this step every day until you feel nothing but love toward the other person. This step takes whatever amount of time it takes. Days, months, years. And it does not mean you have to let the person back into your life. That's a key piece. Or that you have to keep watching the news. So while these steps appear sequentially, in practice one might need to go back and forth or repeat steps. And step 7 in the process can be a big step depending on the nature of what happened. Be gentle with yourself in this step. Allow yourself whatever experience you need to have. Remember that forgiveness is a process. Some situations are likelier to be easier to forgive than others. Forgiveness transforms us, and transformation does not usually feel good while it is happening. The next slide is the goal is to get back to love within ourselves. The love is always there at our center as our essence. In forgiveness, we are simply freeing it to flow unencumbered within us and out through us. Loving ourselves. No matter what has happened, we forgive because we need to get back to our own true nature of love. And when you're done, the last step is, John, the last slide. Thank you for coming today.
There was a time in my life, thought I had to do it all for myself. Didn't know the grace of God was sufficient. I didn't know the love of God was at hand. But now I can say, if you are discouraged, struggling just to make it through another day, gotta let it go. Gotta let it all go. Are you listening? You got to let it all go. what you have to say. I release and I let go. Let the Spirit run my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No, no more struggle, no more strife. With my faith, I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. Oh, I release and I let go. Let the Spirit run my life, and my heart is open. Yes, I'm only here for God. No, 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 no more struggle, no more strife. With my faith, I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. Oh, I release and I let go. Let the Spirit run my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No, no, no more struggle, no more strife. With my faith, I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. Oh, I am free in the Spirit. Yeah, yeah. Do you want to be free? Then let me hear you say yes. Yes, I